This is the Angry Birds Bird Minute, sponsored by Angry Birds for their 15th anniversary, where we tell you all about a cool bird that may or may not be angry. This week's bird is the bearded vulture, otherwise known as the ossifrage or bone breaker. Every single time I learn something new about bearded vultures, I have to look up a source for it because literally everything about them is insane. This bird is huge, 7 to 9 foot wingspan, and it gets its name from bristles under its chin which resemble a beard. This is where the unbelievable parts start. 85 to 90% of their diet is bones. They can swallow many bones whole, and their bite is strong enough to crack a lamb's femur. Beyond that, they will drop bones from great heights to get to the marrow. In their mating ritual, bearded vultures will literally fall in love, locking talons with potential mates and diving dramatically through the sky before separating and rising into the air to begin again. But are they angry? They have a bone to pick with a wide variety of prey, and have been documented dropping turtles, hyraxes, and even 2-foot monitor lizards from the air. Sometimes they will even go beyond animals they can lift directly, using their wings to beat goats and antelopes off of cliffs. On a scale of 1 to angry, the bearded vulture is mad to the bone.
This is Wild Green Streams. I'm Rhett.
I'm Curtis.
I'm Io.
And with us today is documentary filmmaker Jennifer Brown. Jennifer, for people who haven't seen your work, how would you describe it?
Yeah, I would say I would describe it as a handcrafted nature films that show people as part of nature and try to present new ways to look at nature. And a lot of our films are about imperiled species or imperiled ecosystems. And so we often tend to represent the underdogs. And then once we got a reputation for that, from a little beach mouse to federally endangered Florida grasshopper sparrow, then that just begets more projects. So if it's a small and misunderstood, usually into nature films is all over that. All of our stories share, some kind of human relationships. We're not just going to have a natural history focus on the incredible animal behaviors and the spectacle. It's going to be in the context of the culture, the history, the human history, the current human community that relates to that species or that place. So we try to create more, multi-dimensional films to get people to appreciate, whether it's the Everglades or the film that prompted our discussion here, Gentle Giant, about the Gulf sturgeon. I mean, people who have spent their whole lives in Florida and are multi-generation in Florida have still never heard of the Gulf sturgeon. The big system, the Gulf sturgeon, migrates between the Gulf of Mexico and all these rivers.
I grew up on the Swanee River, so I actually have been really familiar with them for my whole life. We would see them around the edges of our experience there. Like we would go kayaking on the river and then one would come up and take a big breath of air next to us because that's a thing that this fish does sometimes. It's a massive animal. It's like 6 feet long, but they jump out of the river. And so we would go to certain places where we knew they were jumping and just watch them.
So growing up in that area, you might be familiar. There's all kind of false stories about this fish, about why it does what it does. I mean, even today, biologists, worked really hard to sort out what the heck this fish is up to, because it's mostly at the bottom of the river. It's a dark tea-colored river. You only see them when they jump, and then they go out to the Gulf in the winter and feed. So people don't see them, and so it's a very mythological creature. I mean, I don't know. I encountered multiple people. It's fine if they don't understand like the recent science with why they jump, but there's all kind of story. And so you did ask for a story earlier. So do you want to hear a Gulf sturgeon local story?
I would love to
hit
hear.
us. We'd love it.
Absolutely.
So I met a family. It was at a restaurant along the Swanee River. And they were just moving to the area and looking for a home. And so they were in the short term staying at this RV area. And actually they were from Miami. And when they checked into the RV area, the person in charge, so person of that local community, said, whatever you do, don't go swimming with your kids, because there's this huge fish out there and it will suck you down. It's like a vacuum and it will suck you down to the bottom. So, don't ever go swimming. And where that comes from, I mean, there's kind of some truth to it is like a vacuum cleaner, but it's not vacuuming up children. It's vacuuming little shrimps and little worms, and I mean, it doesn't feed all summer. So if you're swimming in the river, it's not even eating. It does not care about you. It cares about conserving energy. And that's part of the gentle giant title, because often this animal is depicted, like a monster. It's like they jump and there's collisions with people, which can injure people, or has even unfortunately been some tragic loss of life has happened, because if you're driving really fast in your boat and this 300-pound behemoth jumps, which is just to get air to refill its swim bladder, that's not going to be pretty.
Yeah.
So the gentle giant counters, it's not the chasing monsters, kind of, there has been a depiction. That was my first reference when I started the project. And this is nothing of that sort. And so it's from the very get-go, we're sharing with people, this is not a monster. It's not going to suck you down. And let's just get this straight. This is a gentle giant. It's an ancient creature, and it's imperiled, and it's got quite the story.
That's awesome. So how did you decide on the Sturgeon project in particular, but any of the other ones, talking about how the small, unheard of, underappreciated animals, which I love that. I really like insects. I think they're super cool. And I didn't for a long time until I took a class in college. And I was like, whoa, these guys are amazing. And insects get a bad rap in a lot of places, but I'm like, no, guys, please. So whenever my friends and family have heard me go on ad nauseum about, no, they're really cool.
Io's nickname is #1 bug fan.
There you go. Exactly. You can tell by my name. Any of these projects, was there just sort of like, the circumstance has lined up where you were in the right place at the right time? Or were you like, this is a project that I have wanted to create for my whole life and I am going to make this happen? And then you were like, okay, Sturgeon is the thing.
I would say that I do have a project where I've pursued, but most of the time, since I need to earn a living, it's folks contacting me.
Mm-hmm.
And so I guess I would say a little backstory. I have done a few insect films, because we're at the beginning of the Everglades drainage, but we're also along the Lake Wales Ridge. And that is what's left of it from orange groves has a ton of really cool insects, that burrow in the sand, and that with all the different endemic plants that are only found on this ridge. So actually one of my most popular videos, maybe something, I was working on a tortoise film here along the ridge, a gopher tortoise, about a really old tortoise. It's over 65 years old. And
Wow.
the film is called Queen of Red Hill.
Oh,
Yeah, I've definitely seen posts about that.
you've seen the film, Curtis, because a couple years ago, before Wild Green Memes was a huge thing, I made some film festivals as fundraisers for a local nonprofit called Ashton Biological Preserve, which we actually still give some grants to through our nonprofit now. But at the time, we did these little mini film festivals, and I would go looking on YouTube for nature documentaries and just send emails to whoever made them. So I forgot that it was you, but I must have emailed you back in the day, and because someone mailed us a thumb drive with this film and we showed it.
I'm so glad I dropped the Queen of Red Hill. It was me.
Yeah.
Yes,
Look at
that's
that.
crazy.
You contacted me. I think you showed it at a brewery in Gainesville.
Yeah.
Yeah,
we
I was
did,
there
we
as
did.
well.
So
That's wild.
You know the story, man. So that I was out there waiting for, it wasn't the queen, it was a different tortoise. You got to be real patient waiting for these guys, because it's not like at a certain time, even the same individual, each day will be a different time if they come out. And I noticed in a palmetto frond, that's the other beauty thing about going into nature is, if you're quiet and you become more observant, and it's incredible what you can see, what's happening all around you. And I found a little jumping spider curled up, and it's a little web home of a palmetto frond. So I put my camera on it, and this whole drama took place after it slowly came out, and it's this orange and green color. So anyway, I captured this whole little behavior of it coming out of its little silky home and doing a little kind of dance with its front little paws. And then it moved around to go hunt some bugs, and then it returned back to its little burrow. And then actually had a little hatch on its burrow. It shut its little door.
Interesting. Yeah.
We called it the Jumping Spider Spectacular. And that thing, I swear, that is the most popular, no matter how much money or how far I've come in my career. That's what people want to watch. So I guess the connect back is the reason I got the Gold Sturgeon film. Well, I guess that I would have to go back 2 films to when I left the Everglades and I came up here to live in the piney woods here by the Lake Wales Ridge, by the Everglades. And just an hour away from me is the Florida grasshopper sparrow. And so before I'd really set up my company, I got a job at Kissimmee Prairie in the Kissimmee Prairie Preserve State Park as a technician, just a survey. And I also offered, I said, hey, I've got these other skills. So what happened with that is I just discovered a much bigger story for what's going on with recovering that. And that project is called Little Brown Bird, and it's 10 years in the works. I've been documenting all the efforts for biologists to recover the species who got very close to extinction in 2017 and now with captive breeding. And it's an amazing story going into the prairie, into the dry prairie. So it's a 12-episode web series. So I've been working on that. So through that I met Sandra Sneckenberger, which is a great name. And she's a lovely biologist. And she's with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, and she worked on beach mice. So she told the beach mouse recovery coordinator about Jennifer Brown. And so she contacted me and paid me through the Escambia County, which is where Perdido Key is. And then after that film was done, and that was kind of my breakthrough film, I'd say, that got into some film festivals and got some attention, and I had a larger budget than usual. And then Christy Yanches, who's the beach mouse recovery gal, she did so good in the film representing the mouse, that she the Gulf Sturgeon biologist, they're in the same office in North Florida, and he saw what she had for her species and said, I want that for the Gulf Sturgeon.
I love that.
Adam Kaiser. So that's how that rolled out.
That's so
that's
cool.
Great. It just goes to show who you know. And going to school in Gainesville, being from Florida, I remember a lot of effort that went into the grasshopper sparrow's recovery. And so at one point I was like, all of the statistics about this bird, they're being so few in number. And I'm like, I know like 10 people working to save this bird right now, like probably as many people working to save the birds as there are birds left. So it's like another way that the worlds have collided. So that's so cool. And I love that you were saying that the sturgeon biologist was like, oh, I want one of those movies for my species. Like they need to get some love, and they just hired you on. Like that's the best.
Yeah, I mean, it's such a compliment when folks that aren't fish people watch Gentle Giant and say, they really enjoyed it, and they don't really like films like that. And it's all, just super passionate fish biologists who are absolutely dedicated to this animal, and thinking about using humor to represent species. I mean, I thought about that a bit, and really these characters brought a lot of humor to that story. At the beginning of the film, one of the biologists is catching a juvenile Gulf sturgeon, and him and his work partner from the USGS are singing a little song. They've worked together for so long, and they've got we caught ourselves a baby sturgeon, not too big. And they're
that cracked me up when I was watching the video you
They
shared.
seem like they're having so much fun.
Let's include a soundbite of that right here.
Yeah.
Yes, please put it over my awful voice.
We'll do a side-by-side comparison. Can you sing better than a fish biologist?
That's the new karaoke.
We got ourselves a baby sturgeon, not that small. It's a baby,
The next film festival, there will also be karaoke to all the little songs that field biologists come up with.
Only
when
fish
they're in the
biologists.
field.
We need to get even
Only
more
fish
niche.
biologists. The songs have to all be about fish.
Yeah. So it could be any biologist, but it does have to be a song about fish. So like you could study
trees, but like your song does have to be about fish. You could study bees, but your song does have to be about fish. It's like,
Can I be
kinda
like a
narrow it
really
down.
pedantic person who points out that all vertebrates are basically fish? So it could be
Yes.
about even
Yeah.
land animals.
Invertebrates
Yes.
are not even on thin ice. They're just not allowed.
They're just in the water. They're not on the ice anymore. The ice is broken.
This will be the second episode where I mention there's one species of insect that lives in Antarctica.
Speaking of, well, it's not really speaking of Antarctica, but it's what brought this question to mind. Do you have a shot that's like technically impossible, but you would really like to get? Something that I just learned the other day is that under enormous pressures, a lot of materials become invisible. So like in the center of the earth, a lot of that material down there is actually transparent. We'll never get to see it, but under like those incredible pressures, it'd be such a weird thing to film, is you just go down and then stuff becomes clear. It should be totally different than that. But do you have anything that's like literally we know it's out there, but you can't actually access it?
Well, I mean, that's a lot of nature. I mean, there's so much complexity. Nature is not just more complex than we think, it's more complex than we can think. So, if you make films like we do, where we're trying to show processes, and interrelationships, I mean, there's a ton of things, I would say, when a hurricane comes through, in the beach mouse film, that's a big question. I mean, that's a regular disturbance. Hurricane comes through, they live on the primary dunes, and supposedly the beach mice just get washed away. But the biologist said there's a little air pocket under there. So, that's just one example. Also, the Gulf sturgeon does not do well in hurricane. When hurricanes come through, and the one that just went through the Idalia, went through right, Swanee River, Old Town. Actually, there's if you remember in the film, that Odaland Island, which is connected to the historic fishery, that got totally washed out. But yeah, so what's happened, during a hurricane in these systems, the Gulf sturgeon takes a big mortality hit. So what's happening during a hurricane? I remember I used one example a while ago about, one of the prettiest things I saw on that dry prairie waiting for is a burned prairie. And I was filming some deer, and I looked up and I saw spider ballooning above.
Cool.
Oh yeah.
That's
And
neat.
I mean, there's no way. I mean, there's
Can you explain spider ballooning to people who don't know what it is? I know what it is.
Well, maybe Io, our entomologist here.
The funny part is that when you said I know what it is, it made you sound less like you knew what it was.
Oh, I know.
Yeah.
That was the intention.
Yeah, it was like for other people, I definitely know what it is, but for other people who might not
Yeah,
know.
they use some sort of static electricity or something to put their webs out and just float through the air. That's the extent of my knowledge.
It is static electricity. The web is charged one way and the air is charged the other way, and if they let enough of the web out, it'll start lifting them up into the air, is the basic principle.
I happened to see this also. I was in Illinois. I was just in this like little park and around a lake, and there was a railing, and I was like, oh, there's a bunch of little spiders on the railing. That's cool. And I was like, they're all like sticking their butts up in the air. Like, that's weird. What are they doing? And so I like looked closer, and then you could just, when the light hit it just right, you could see the silk spooling out from their abdomen, and then eventually they would just and
Remember when that
go
happened
away.
in Charlotte's Web?
Oh.
He had to say goodbye to all of them after losing
Yeah.
Charlotte. It's heartbreaking.
So Jennifer, what shot would you get of spiders ballooning if you had the world's most impossible camera?
Can I say I would not pick spider because I don't know much. I would like to refocus this impossible shot
Sure.
on bats, because before I went to film school, I did a lot of bat field work. That would be my dream, other than the Florida grasshopper sparrow little brown bird project, is to work on a bat project one day. So gosh, yeah, I mean, that's the thing when they're nocturnal, when you take away light, of course there's technology where you can see their bodies moving around. But maybe I have never thought about what's impossible, but the way that they use sound and then hone in on their prey, whether it's a little frog or a lizard, they're pretty amazing acrobatics. So I don't know, I think it would just, this kind of unknown nocturnal world of bats, if that would be my dream, is to get insight into that and to show the public something new about what these guys are really up to.
I would love to watch that film. If it ever becomes a reality, you will have at least one viewer, and it will be me. And is there any bat in particular that you would like to work with? There are a bunch of, I know lots of people, seen lots of talks by people who've studied some bats in Florida that are imperiled and are endangered and things like that. But is there a particular species that you're like, this is the one that I want to uncover all the mysteries of, or you just be happy to do any of them?
Well, a lot of my background when I was doing field work was with fruit bats and nectar bats.
Ooh.
And, I got to go over to Papua New Guinea, and we got to
Wow.
outside of Madang in the north part, which if you're a tourist on our plane going up there, the visitors there, it was either you're a missionary or you're a diver. And I was with the research crew. So up there, they have these tube-nosed fruit bats. And they're just incredible large eyes. So they're very visual, kind of like the flying foxes.
Mm-hmm.
And they're covered in spots like green and yellow. And they got these tubular nostrils. And when I remember years ago when I worked on this, no one really knew what the heck those tubes were for. And the locals had different names for them, like Ghost Man, because they super blend into the foliage there. So these guys are cruising around, they're eating figs, they've got really strong teeth. The nectar one has got a long snout, and then the fruit bat has a shorter snout. And that was the research that I was a technician for, was we'd go capture these guys, and then we'd put them in a little plexiglass container and do experiments. And it sounds manipulative, but it was temporary, and these guys were not imperiled. But this was my job, was I would present to them different types of fruit, different hardness and different size, and I would use a video camera. And if this is kind of a full circle to where this conversation, the theme of the conversation, this is really where I kind of knew I wanted to go into to be a filmmaker, was as a biologist, with access to these video cameras, which we were filming these super cool bats and then releasing them the next day. And of course, they had a full belly with the papaya and the apple that we gave them. But yeah, I got to run around during the day with the video camera. So I'll always be grateful that, it's funny how life works out, that, I took this job that would had that, behavioral video aspect. And who knows if I didn't take that, I don't know if we would be having this conversation.
What an incredible experience.
Yeah, because maybe you would have eventually found yourself into filmmaking anyway, but you would have taken a different path. So you might not have made the films that you have. And so it's crazy to think about how circumstances how they worked out.
Yep, it sure is. Every little thing, whether we're aware of it or not, influences our path.
Every little thing.
Oh.
I don't know if we have the music license for that. Maybe.
So Jennifer, do you have anything you want to plug?
So Little Brown Bird it's in the final stages of post-production, and we're looking for funding to complete post-production and a platform for it. And it's about unraveling the mysterious decline of the Florida grasshopper sparrow, the most endangered bird still, I believe, in the continental United States. So we have a website, and if anybody would like to be involved in that, you can contact me through the website.
And we'll have a link to that website in the description for this episode. So that's our show. Thanks for listening. You can support the show at patreon.com/wildgreenmemes. That's memes with an M. We've got some nice merch that comes in the mail every month, lots of different silly meme-related designs, and you also get a shout-out at the end of the podcast. Until next time, I'm Rhett.
I'm Curtis.
I'm Io.
And I'm Jennifer.
And happy Year of the Raccoon.